Good evening, all. J B Boda Insurance and Reinsurance Broker welcome you all today for the webinar series on Minimalist Corporate Lifestyle. I'm Aruna Howal, Head of Employee Benefit at J B Boda, would be host for today. Having good emotional health is a fundamental aspect of fostering resilience, self-awareness, and overall contentment. Keep in mind that having good emotional health doesn't mean you're always happy or free from negative emotions. It's about having the skills and resources to manage the ups and downs of day-to-day life. On this note, I'm delighted to introduce our key speaker for today evening, Dr. Shibani Belwalkar. Dr. Shibani Belwalkar, founder Theory Purpose, is an adjunct faculty at NMIMS, Mumbai, and visiting faculty across several leading business schools, including SP Jain Global, SDA Bocconi, Woxsen, ISP, and IIT. Her PhD was endorsed by prestigious Faith at Work, Princeton University. Dr. Shibani is a leading organizational cultural transformation expert and leadership coach, in addition to being speaker in the field of purpose at work. A certified facilitator in Barrett's Value Assessment, Hogan Certified, and a certified practitioner of happiness at work. Her programs mix unconventional and original research frameworks centered on purpose, delivering deep insights into practical performance drivers. Experience in the design and delivery of courses, both e-learning, experiential, and blended, Shibani has gained respect for her unique style of facilitating through simplified concepts and creative exampling. Her research publications include papers on Lokasamgraha, workplace spirituality, cross-national happiness, and a chapter in the textbook on talent management by Cengage Learning. She has been quoted in the best-selling book, The Art of Quiet Influence by Davis J. Shibani spends half of her time in Mumbai and Washington, D.C., and half in Washington, D.C., sorry to correct that, where she has international office whilst partnering with her global clients. We are truly delighted and privileged to have her here with us today for a discussion on emotional well-being. Quite the need for all of us in today's scenario. Along with Dr. Shibani, I also welcome our renowned panelists, Dr. Sandesh Fernandez and Ms. Shilpa Goti. Dr. Sandesh is a well-trained allopathic physician and have completed more than a decade in medical work with patients. He has been working with insurance industry, strategizing some of the dynamic verticals like wellness, healthcare consulting. Currently, he's a CMO at National Life and General Insurance Company, SAOG Oman, which is in Middle East. Ms. Shilpa comes to us from Reliance Entertainment. She is a general manager over there, and she's a veteran with more than 15 years of experience and certified disc from Extended Disc Finland certified and job analyst from Hague Group. Currently, she is associate with Reliance Entertainment, as I said. Kindly note that you can raise questions using the chat facility, and we will try to answer as many questions as possible, considering the time limit that we have. Now, I'll not hold back the speaker and you. Over to you, Ms. Dr. Belwalkar.
Thank you so much, Aruna. It's a pleasure, and hi to Shilpa and Sandesh once again. So interestingly, what I'm going to do before we even start is if I have to quickly ask you all a question about your anxiety levels in the current situation. So let me take a minute and look at the chat box and ask you that if you were to give yourself a score on the scale of 1 to 10, where 1 is the least bit of anxiousness, 10 is the highest state of anxiousness, what score would you give yourself? So take a minute and let me see the chat box with your answers. 7, okay, I can see 8. I love it. Someone said 2, all right. 10, 10 being the most in terms of anxiousness. 7, 5, all right, okay. My God, oh wow, this is technology is super fast. I can see the way the answers are coming up. All right, fantastic. So the average seems to be a level of 7. Well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on which part of the world you're all in. Welcome to a session on emotional well-being. Interestingly, we have all been caught up in doing because we need to have. So the doing leads to having. And this is a pause that we're going to take into just being. Because the more you want, the more you have to do. But we're forgetting to be just be. And interestingly, human beings have forgotten what it actually means to give up the having and the doing and just being. And emotions are our superpowers. So the more we can power up our being, the more we will actually be emotionally well. And emotionally well people are superhuman beings. So welcome once again to our session on emotional well-being in the minimalistic corporate world. Looking at the scores that I can see flash up on screen right now, and I can see we're actually a 7 and a 10, and it's fine because this is the new world, it's the new reality. But there's a story that comes to my mind. In fact, it crossed my mind a couple of days back when I was thinking about anxiety levels with all of us. Interestingly, and for all of those who are joining us from different parts of the world, this is one story that comes from Indian mythology. And a bit of a background here, growing up as young kids to parents who lived 8,000 kilometers away in a country in Africa called Cameroon, which at that point in time was not even heard of. We grew up listening to stories and hearing stories. And you know, a lot of the Indian audience over here will understand what it means with Indian parents. And the farther away you go from your country, the more you want to be Indian and create an Indian essence for yourself and your children. So my parents were in the same lot, and they ensured that we were actually reading Amar Chitra Katha as a daily diet. So we have grown up on stories, and I am a notorious storyteller. So let's start with the story as well. When we talk about this level of anxiety, sometimes we're happy, sometimes we're sad, sometimes we're anxious, we're going crazy with worry. The story is about King Trishanku. So King Trishanku was a very virtuous king, and he walked up to his sage Vashisht and asked his sage that, you know what, sage, I actually want to take my mortal body and rise to heaven. Grant me that wish, and let's create a very intense puja, a very intense ritual, a yajna as it's called, so that I can be blessed with the boon of being able to take my mortal body and rise to heaven. So Vashisht looked at him and said, you must be crazy. You know, the gods will never allow this. And go back and do your good deeds and then rise to the heaven. Don't try to do these shortcuts. But King Trishanku was at it. He was adamant. So he said, no, if you're not going to do it, I'm going to go to my other friend. So he goes to Guru Vishwamitra. Now, sage Vishwamitra was known to be hot-headed, and he was very capable, and he was charged with energy, and he liked to take on challenges. So when Trishanku walked up to Vishwamitra, Vishwamitra said, sure, you seem to be a very righteous king. I'm going to help you. And then he has this elaborate yajna and this big puja that he creates, and he tells Trishanku, all right, when I chant rise Trishanku, I'd like you to rise to the heavens. So he does that, and then as soon as the yajna is over, we can see Trishanku actually, with his legs folded, in a sitting position, start rising to the heavens. And above in the heavens, there is chaos and there's a lot of confusion because the gods are looking at what's happening. So they call out to Vishwamitra and said, don't do this. But Vishwamitra is adamant, and he sends Trishanku up. So Trishanku's rising. And the gods get really angry and they halt him right there. So they stop Trishanku right midway between heaven and earth. And they say, Trishanku, you mortal mere human being, go back down. What you're doing is not acceptable. It's against the laws of the universe. You really need to go back. Don't try to do this. So by saying that, they actually push Trishanku back down again. So he is upside down, charging back into earth. Now, of course, Vishwamitra in his anger, he looks up and he says, don't challenge my powers. And he raises his hand and he pushes Trishanku back up into the sky again. Poor Trishanku is now between two battles of the gods and Vishwamitra, upside down, hanging between heaven and earth. So Vishwamitra finally, when he comes down, starts to see reasoning. And he listens to the pleas of the gods who turn around and tell him that Vishwamitra, don't do this, because it's going to destroy the laws of nature. It's going to destroy the laws of the universe. So by then, Vishwamitra has gotten his calm back in place and he says, all right, but you know what? I'm also a man of my words. So I have promised Trishanku that he's going to go to heaven. So let me recreate a heaven for him between heaven and earth. And that is known as Trishanku's heaven. Between heaven and earth, Trishanku's heaven. Interestingly, sometimes I think we're also going through that phase, because none of us know what this is going to look like at the end of it. Nobody knows where we're going to end up. And most importantly, we're a little worried about where we think this is going to affect us in the end. And at that point in time, we must realize that we are truly in the midst of the biggest challenge that is enveloping us. In fact, the biggest one after World War II. It's a great disaster. But you know, the common element you can see are the heroic efforts being made all around us to litigate this risk, to litigate this crisis. Interestingly, what we need to realize is that 20 years later, 50 years later, many years later, can we turn back and look at ourselves and say, hey, you know what? I showed up as my best self. I really made that effort to actually bring out the best in myself and show up in this time of crisis. Even though there are heroic efforts all around us, it's time for us to find that hero within us. It's actually time to find out what really grounds us and what's going to find success and what drives us to be the best people that we know we are. There's one thing common in all the heroic efforts going around us, and that is the human mind. In fact, the human mind is going to find a cure for the virus. I mean, the vaccine is going to come out from the human mind. It's the human mind that is making all these changes to our behaviors. It's the human mind that is going to reinvent our businesses and the way we serve each other. It's the human mind that's going to play a critical role in the way we protect ourselves and our near and dear ones. So it's a human mind that matters. It's a human mind, in fact, thanks to J B Boda, that has connected all of us from across the world today. I believe we have participants from Mauritius and from Africa and from Malaysia and from Hong Kong. And I'm delighted, honored, and privileged. It's a human mind that has done this. Would you have imagined a couple of years ago where 300 and 400 of us would have gotten together to exchange stories and personal experiences on what it truly means to be connected and to get together in terms of our ideas and our thought processes and good wishes? So it's a human mind. In fact, yes, and I can see a beautiful comment, and keep those comments coming up. I will try to answer as many as I can. And hello from Nepal, as I see that. Absolutely. It's a human mind. And the human mind is going to find solutions for all of us at all points in time. Well, interestingly, what happens is we tend to look at our mind as a very dysfunctional, kind of like a ghost in the machine of our body. And what happens is then we start thinking that, the mind has a way of its own, and we don't really need to start focusing on the mind in different ways. But then, once again, let me share with you a couple of details that matter as far as the mind is concerned. There is a problem. There is a big problem happening around us. So there is an even bigger problem than the virus that is attacking us today. And that is the stress over virus. The syndrome where we start stressing over challenges and trying times and difficult times around us. So the stress over is actually greater than the virus or the challenge itself. Now, interestingly, you don't even have to be in the same room, or it doesn't have to be in your immediate purview. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to be inside the challenge or facing it right then and there. It could be a tweet, it could be a Facebook post, it could be a news article, it could be a conversation, it could be the look on someone's face that can suddenly make you realize that the damage is real, and then your stress over syndrome kicks into place. Now, it can be picked up from so many different ways, and the worst part about this virus, which is the stress over virus to the real virus, mutates. It becomes fear, it becomes anxiety, it can even become paranoia. And then that is what freezes us. But here's some good news. I don't have any vaccine to the current cure to the current disease around us, but I do have a vaccine and antibodies for the stress over virus, which will also help us fix our emotional well-being. We're in the phase of minimalism, and as rightly put up by the J B Boda group, all of us are experiencing minimalism in different ways. So we have also picked the 5 top keys, the key principles, the key antibodies that we need to inject in ourselves to Aruna will have to figure out that prize, J B Boda, but yes. Okay, too many social groups. There's another prize that I'm going to hand out to Shrikant as well. Okay, Mukesh says we've survived without newspapers. Absolutely, no newspapers. Though for me, it's a little bit of a crisis because we have a little pup in the house, and the newspapers are the staple playground, for his business. Okay, we don't even need wallets. All right, Souvik, another prize for you. Aruna, you've got a big job keeping track. I can work from home, and absolutely too much of incoming information. We've cut it all out. No need for household help. Okay, all right, interesting ones. That's right. So we also are looking at a minimalistic approach today. Injecting ourselves for emotional well-being. Now, are you ready for your first antibody? The first vaccination we're going to take to immune ourselves against the stress over virus. So are you ready? You can type in there saying ready to me so I know that we're actively engaging in our session today. Okay, yes, ready. All right, Farida, I can see that. Hello, yes, Dave, ready, great. So there we go. The first antibody is P for physiology. Now, when you go to a doctor, he's probably going to prescribe medicines to you, but he's also probably going to give you one of these three things. A, he's going to tell you to eat right, mixture of 3 vegetables and fruits, as we've been hearing all along. B, he's going to turn around and tell you to sleep 8 hours at least 8 hours of sleep. And 3, he's going to tell you to exercise. Well, we think that all of this is for the body, but no, this is actually for the mind, because here's what it means. The mind is inside the brain, rooted in the brain, which is rooted to the body. So healthy body, healthy brain, and healthy mind. Think about how you feel when you don't eat right, or you don't sleep right, or even if you don't exercise. Can you quickly drop in a word of what you felt at some point in time in your life when you felt you've not slept enough? What do you feel? What is the feeling you get? Irritated, anger, correct. My daughter, even though she's a teenager right now, I know when she's angry, and I know what the source of anger is. It's generally hunger. So you feel that when you're not eating right, you're not sleeping right, you're exhausted, fatigued all the time, you don't even want to get out of bed. But hey, you know what? The fact that you made it here today, you've already utilized some part of that power of yours, that emotional power to come and make a difference here. So let's see what are the other ways we can actually win over. When you think about how you feel when you've not slept, or you've not eaten right, or you've not exercised, but there's research also supporting that. Now, Johns Hopkins did a research to tell us about the effects of not having 8 hours of sleep. And they researched and found out that it results in a mood swing problem, in memory problem, our judgment is affected, health is affected in various ways. In fact, the chances of obesity increased by 50%. There's a 36% increase in colorectal cancer chances, and 3 times more risk in diabetes. So imagine the after effects or the effects of not sleeping well. Think of exercise, particularly when we're looking at how to keep our body healthy. But interestingly, there's a particular function we need to focus on when we talk about exercise, and I'm coming to that in just a moment. And that function that we talk about is emotional distress. It's called the stress syndrome. It's called the stress response. I'm drawing the connection between exercise and stress response. Now, when you think about distress or anxiety, you're actually thinking in terms of what's going out there in the world, you know, the virus, my business, my job, my friends, or, you know, something that's happening outside in the world. But take a minute to look around you, and you will realize that there are some people who are not just surviving, but they're thriving. Now, if they're in the same situation as us, what's going on? What's the difference here? It makes us think that the difference here is not so much what's going out there, it's what's going on here. It's about the mind. And when I talk about the mind, it's not just a mind, it's a mind rooted in the brain. So let's pause and take a look at what happens here. Because the more we're dependent on our mind, the more we're going to change the way we react as well. Now, stress is fine. It's a physiological function, and it's essential. There is good stress and there is bad stress. Now, stress is a form of arousal. I mean, you need a certain amount of stress to just get past your day. Of course, it's your body's reaction to a demand or a challenge. But when that stress gets across a particular level, that's when you actually realize that it's going into the distress zone. Now, if you have no stress, you're either asleep or not alive, but that's okay. The problem happens when we move up a curve and we start seeing too much of distress or too much of stress. When we get over into that dream of too much of stress, that's when we start having the problems. So I'm just going to take a minute to show you one graph here that very beautifully demonstrates the meaning of stress and the way stress moves across different curves. Right, so I'm going to take a quick minute to ask you all, can you see the graph here? It's called the Yurkis-Dodson law of arousal. Now, what this graph is actually teaching us, and we're looking at the relative relationship of stress and exercise, is that when we're actually getting stressed, we move up the curve of performance, and performance starts increasing and reaches a peak with a certain amount of stress. The minute that stress increases, we start rapidly going down the curve of poor performance. Our brain gets out, our judgmental abilities go for a toss. We're not able to think clearly. We can't look at solutions. We go into fight or a flight mode. Our ancestors, the cavemen, were clearly in a fight or flight mode because either they had to, if you had a lion snapping against your knees or your ankles, you're obviously going to start thinking about what's happening to you. So you is that it actually elevates our thinking ability, because what it does is it starts extricating the cortisol or the adrenaline, and it moves it into our muscles so that we don't have to get into the fight or flight mode. Now, interestingly, what happens here is that there are two parts of our brain. There is a prefrontal neocortex here, which is at the front, and then there is a lower amygdala over here, which is also called the reptilian brain. Again, I mean, obviously because the reptiles also share it with us. So it's a reptilian brain or the amygdala, and then it's a neocortex in the front, which is responsible for sound. Yep, the sound is back. We've got network issues everywhere, no problem. It's part of life. So our amygdala is where our emotions reside and our feelings, and the prefrontal cortex is where essentially you've got all your good parts, your decision-making abilities, and your IQ and your cognitive abilities are all right there. These two parts of the brain are constantly fighting with each other to get control. With the slightest bit of trigger, the amygdala hijacks the cognitive abilities that we have, and every decision starts appearing in a binary framework: fight or flight, stay or flee, yes or no, black or white. Everything is just a yes or no. Now, what we need to do is to bring ourselves back and get back the control of our cognitive abilities. And that can happen when we reduce the stress that we're experiencing. So when you work out, what you're doing is you're taking the adrenaline out of your blood, you're extricating it and using it in your muscles. Have you all noticed what you feel when you're actually working out and you've come back after a great workout? Probably feel calm, feel peaceful. There's research that says that you actually even feel a lot more creative. So I'm opening out the chat box once again. Can you tell me what you feel when you work out? What are those top words that come to your mind when you had a great workout? In fact, that's what the doctors are saying. And when we talk about the first antibody is physiological exercise. Get physical. Workout, whether it's weightlifting, it's running, it's cardio, get physical. 2 words, get physical. Physiological changes, physiological health, getting physical, working out changes the way. Okay, that's true, we hungry. And of course, our internet connection seems to be going back and forth, but not an issue. We will live with this and we will share it. It's not an issue at all. So physiologically, that's right. Get physical, 2 words, is when you're looking at utilizing exercise as a stress buster. So exercise is not just for the body, it is for the mind. In fact, I'm going to share a real life example of a young girl whose photograph I'm just going to put on screen right now for all of us to see. And let me do the, so since we're toggling between various computers and machines, okay. So we're toggling between different screens and we're trying to work with the kind of technology that we have, but this is all part and parcel of life. That's not a problem at all. We live through all of these and we live very well through all of these. So it's about looking at different challenges and being extremely creative. So there's a young girl called Lolo Jones. In fact, that's her name. There she is on screen. Lolo Jones was slated to be the 100-meter hurdle winner in the Beijing Olympics in 2008. So she was slated to win the Olympics in 2008. She was winning all the trial rounds and she really at it and she was great, practiced really well. But you know what happened eventually? At one point in time when the final race began, can you tell me what happened? She lost on the 9th hurdle. She lost at the 9th hurdle. So there was an interview that she gave after the race to discuss what went wrong. And she said, in fact, quoted in her own words, that everything was going fine. I was running the race like I was enjoying it. It was a normal race. It was just a race as always. I was enjoying what I was doing. And then I started telling my mind, over-instructing it, get your legs, they need to be more strappy, increase that stride, ensure there's more pressure on your ankle, move your body with a little bit more energy in the front. And she was giving those extra instructions to your mind. As a result, she lost the race. So that is about stress and performance. If we can keep that stress to a minimalistic level or use it to enhance our performance and not let it go down the curve of distress, we're fine. Now, for this stress response syndrome, we also have something which is called relaxation response syndrome. So to deal with this, there's a how-to. I mean, it's all great to understand that you need to reduce the stress, but eventually we need to find the tools on how we can actually reduce that. Think of your mind, think of the stress response as an accelerator. You need to get the brake. So there are 2 practical tips for you to put your feet on the brake towards that stress. Now you can sit in front of the TV and relax, but according to me, it can only increase your anxiety levels with some of the images coming on screen. So what can you think of as 2 tools for relaxation? Anybody? So I'm going to open the chat once again and ask you, what are the 2 tools, practical tips? Yoga, absolutely. We come from the land of yoga. That's great. Meditation, sure. But here's what, you know, the first simplistic tip that I could share with you, practical tool, breathe. Simple, daily, deep, rhythmic belly breathing. In fact, deep belly rhythmic breathing. So what it essentially means is when you can slow down your breath, you're actually filling your lungs up more with air. And the right form of breathing means when you can actually make your tummy inflate. You can inflate your tummy, and that is the belly breathing, when the oxygen levels are going right throughout your body. There's a scientific case for this too, where I'm coming to in just a minute. But here's what I mean. Think of deep breathing, for example, where you inhale at the count of 2 and you exhale at the count of 4. Inhale at 2, exhale at 4. Inhale at 2, exhale at 4. You know what, interestingly, if we were to do this for 1 minute, half a minute, and put our brains through a scan, you will be surprised at the incredible results that will emerge. You will see a shift of oxygen, nutrients, blood from the amygdala to the prefrontal cortex. This is the classic way of ensuring that you reduce the amygdala hijack and get back into your cognitive abilities of taking a rational decision and looking at the challenge differently. Now it's easy to turn around and say that, you know, you need to breathe, but imagine having an argument or a stress with someone where you turn around and say, hey, wait, I need to breathe. No. Even just slowing down of your breath will be remarkable. And that's literally the first tool that we have in how do you put the brakes down to your stress response. This is your relaxation response. The second tool is actually called meditation. But we'll come back to a little later, because meditation is not this big thing that you're talking about where it's the voice of God that has to tell you to leave everything and walk into the forest and be silent. Meditation actually has to do with a very simplistic tool of being in the moment. And we're going to look at that in just a minute. So there we are. Get physical, breathe. Your stress response syndrome gets dealt with the relaxation response syndrome. You have an amygdala that is trying to hijack your prefrontal cortex. Get the control back to your cognitive ability so you can take the right rational decision. It's working here. It's all about here. not about out there. And there we go to our next point, our next antibody that we're going to inject ourselves with today. And that is called presence. Now, Matt Killingsworth very interestingly created an app called Track Your Happiness. It's a new scientific research to see what really gives you happiness. It's a basic question that what is it that constantly gives you happiness in your life? Now, the app is very interesting and you can download it from the App Store. A beep goes off every day, and when that beep goes off, all you need to do is answer 3 questions, just 3 questions. A, it asks you what you're doing. B, it asks you what you're thinking. C, it asks you what you're feeling. Now, here's the element. This is millions of people downloading it. Very often, you think you're happy with what you're doing, but when you go down to make a note in that app, you realize you're actually not happy. And that can give you a chance to reset those elements that make you happy. So the data that these researchers analyzed from the information that came from the app made them realize that there are 2 top things that make people happy. And can anyone tell me what those 2 top things could be? What are the sources of your happiness? Which app? It's called Track Your Happiness app on the App Store. Download it, it changed my life, and I will come to it in just a minute. And I will be very happy to answer all your questions even after the webinar is done. Aruna can share my email ID, and I will be only too honored to answer them. Yes, creativity gives you happiness. Relationship, absolutely. Number 1, love is the first happiness trigger. And the second one is, by the way, it's exercise. So the second trigger for happiness is exercise. But that's not the point. We're on our second antibody of presence. What was the interesting research that was done by Matt Killingsworth and his team was they looked at the data and they realized that when people were making a note that they were not happy with what they were doing, it was always almost because of what they were thinking. And when you're thinking about something, it's generally about yourself or in the context of yourself. And it's generally about the future or it's about the past. Now, sure, things are happening in the future and sure, things are happening in the past, but overthinking leads to anxiety, which eventually leads to a lot of different kinds of stress levels. Ruminating also leads to different things, which includes depression. Now, what these researchers realized is we need to figure out how to stop that overthinking and a way of reducing what it is that we can do. Now, of course, meditation is a great app to look at reducing the overthinking and being in the moment. But here's what I'm mentioning about meditation, which I mentioned earlier as a number 2 toolkit on the relaxation response break. Meditation is not something so drastic that you have to learn and it's difficult. It can be simple. It can be breathing. It can be smiling. It can be something as lovely as the sun that's shining outside my window. And I'm going to take just a minute to share that screen with you also. So we're all in a state of lockdown. And this is what I do sometimes. I have the lovely sunset, which I'm going to see in just a couple of minutes over here. Stand out there and just appreciate that. And that's the meaning of being in the moment, being present. Because automatically your breath slows down. You understand what you're doing. A cup of tea, that's right. Sheetal is saying just a cup of tea. I have a little puppy who gives me unconditional love. So it's about taking those moments. Now here's the connection. We're running from meeting to meeting, dashing between things. We're not giving our chance to decompress. So take that moment to understand what's going on. Take that moment to actually pause. And pause is actually a very good word today. We've been avoiding it all our life, but it's actually important and positive. In fact, compare your mind to an app, to your smartphone. Can anyone tell me how many apps are probably currently running on their smartphone at this moment? Your WhatsApp, your messaging, your email, your yes, 3, 5, 7. Yeah, absolutely. So think of your mind as a smartphone. How many apps are running open in your mind right now? Here's a fun fact again. An average person has 25,000 to 50,000 thoughts per day in your mind. 25,000 thoughts a day, divide by 24, divide by 60. Per minute, you're going through a minimum of 17 thoughts. Can you imagine how our functioning will be reducing because of this traffic? So while there's no traffic outside on the road right now with the lockdown, there is traffic happening inside here. And that is reducing the way we're functioning. So take a minute to just settle down. Take a minute to enjoy, to be a moment where you are. In fact, it's also been ratified by transcendental meditation. And we're down to our third P, the third antibody to our stress over vaccination. And that is called positivity. So you can see the way the sun's going down right now. It was right in my eye. It's now settling down. You'll probably get a chance to see the beautiful sunset with me. Third one is positivity. Now, Rick Hansen was the researcher who said the brain is like a Velcro for the negative and non-stick, like a non-stick pan for the positive. You know, when something negative happens, we're very quick to attach ourselves to it and we ruminate and brood over it. But when something good is happening, it doesn't matter because, again, fight or flight, right? If there's no danger, it doesn't matter. But there's danger, you want to overestimate it. It's called the negativity bias. And we have a tendency of overemphasizing the negative, completely making a big thing out of the negative. Because our mind also functions in an algorithm, right? Fight or flight. Think about the news that's coming all around us. You know, even the news, if you understand, is based on this algorithm. People only look at what's happening negative. It's pessimistic. You're not going to get a solution if you go down that tunnel of pessimism. So whilst it sounds really, really drastic and large, take a minute. And when I mean positivity, I actually mean just two things. Sure, we're in the situation right now. What can I do about it? Two questions to ask. A, what can I do about it? Write down 5, use 1. Minimalism again. Think of 5 things, put down 1. If you can't think of it because you're too close to the problem, talk to a friend, talk to a colleague. You'll get 10 things, but look at 1 right now. What can you do? What can you do about the situation? You know, when disaster strikes, that's when innovation comes out. In fact, the second question may sound even sillier, but what is good about this is another question you need to ask yourself. Let me share my personal example, but when my husband and my daughter decided that this lockdown is here to stay, they were at each other. You know, they were arguing all the time and they were complaining all the time and nothing was going right. And it was always about tomorrow and it was always about when the lockdown lifted. But eventually, when they got around to getting their act in order, they started enjoying their company together. They're able to cook together, they work out together, they study together. They're just enjoying this time. Because eventually, it's actually about figuring out what matters and realizing that, you know what, the more you focus on the negative, it's going to grow. Bill Gates has said, the biggest impediment to progress is success. Success makes us lethargic, complacent. We don't want to innovate, right? Think about this. Let me give you a couple of live examples here. The Mahindras, they invented a ventilator in 48 hours. The young lady who used her sanitary manufacturing plant to create masks that she could donate to the hospitals. The 17-year-old Digantika Bose, who day before yesterday developed a prototype of a mask, air-providing, virus-destroying mask. If we're resourceful about any challenge, we will have the solution. Acknowledge the problem, accept it, but then learn how to overcome it. And that's going to come when we start focusing on the positive. 2 questions. What can I do? What's good about this? So I'm going to open the chat box for another 2 minutes quickly to ask you, what is a good thing that you think is emerging from this time at home? In fact, you know, the greatest thing to happen to Ram was Ravan. The greatest thing to happen to Arjun was the Mahabharata. The greatest thing to happen to David was Goliath, right? So what do you think is the good that's coming out from this? All right, you're spending quality time with children, with family. I completely agree. You know, what is good about this is how we can make ourselves a better person. And this is an opportunity, expanding solutions wherever we are. The responses are brilliant and I'm loving them. Cooking, daily gratitude. I'm really, really amazed, Vic. Absolutely. Look at your answers scrolling up, and I think I need 4 pairs of eyes. That's fantastic. Meditation, cleaning, okay, being with family, household time. All right, less pollution, short time with pets. I'm going to take a minute again. Now, as I mentioned earlier, which was a deep. Okay, yeah. Storytelling is in, it's come back. I saw that. Storytelling is in my blood. And I'm a notorious storyteller. So here's what I'm going to share with you again on this story. And a quick yes if my voice has come back on. If I could see a quick yes somewhere, someone type in yes, my voice has come back on. we are on track yet? Okay. Yes. All right. Great. So I'm back to the short story that I'm going to share with you when we're talking about positivity. So there was a prisoner who ran away from jail, and whilst he was running, of course, frantically running, he reached a mountain. And on that mountain, he saw a woman grazing downstairs, down below the mountain. She was with her sheep. So he rushed down the mountain in the hope of being able to find some food because he was on the mountain for days together. So he reaches a village and he sees this really old, frail woman sitting beside a well, eating, just her bread and dipping it in a little bit of oil, and she was eating that. And she had a cloth bag beside her. So this prisoner came and sat beside her, and he said, "Can I eat some bread?" The old woman took the largest piece of bread, gave it to the smallest. As he was looking at the woman, he saw her bag, and in the bag was a stone. And the stone was a really bright, sparkling stone. It looked very precious. So the thief is now thinking that, let me try to ask her for this stone, because that I can sell and make some money. Anyways, what good is it for this old woman right now? She's frail and old. I don't know what she's going to do with this stone. He asks her, "But can you give me? Is that stone precious?" So she says, "Yes." He says, "Can you give it to me?" She gives it to him. So he takes the stone and he walks across to the village, goes to the nearest store, figures out an amount for it, and he's been offered a fairly decent, a nice sum of money for that stone. He's handing over the stone to the shopkeeper when suddenly something goes in his mind. He takes the stone back and he runs across to the old woman, looks for her again by the mountainside where she was still sitting. Goes and gives her back the stone and says, "You know what? I don't need the stone. I need you to give me that which made you give me that stone." So there's always something positive that we can do. We started off at the beginning, right? When I said, look for the hero. You have to turn around 20 years back and say, I showed up as my best self. This positivity is an antibody. And the number 4 antibody, the 4th antibody that we're going to inject ourselves with is called purpose. My favorite subject, the fulcrum of my research, the absolute pivot around which I've spent the last 15 years of my life. But it begins with Viktor Frankl, who survived the Holocaust, and in fact went on to share with us his logotherapy, which says, the prisoners who ended up surviving the Holocaust were not those who were the healthiest. They were the ones who had purpose, who had meaning, who used to find delight and joy in the smallest of things around them. In fact, he always quoted Friedrich Nietzsche, the philosopher. Friedrich Nietzsche says, "He who has a why can survive anyhow. He who has a why can survive anyhow." What is your why? What is your purpose? Again, it's not the sound of God or the voice of God that's going to make you realize what your purpose is. In fact, the purpose of life is to live a life of purpose. And it's a simple question. How are people going to be better off because of you or because of me? Simple question. How are people going to be better off because of me or because of you? Purpose is about giving. It's contribution. It's always external. It's not internal. Purpose is about giving. In fact, Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi also said that when you get into flow, that is when you feel one with what you're doing, that's the time when you realize you're on your path of purpose. Dashrath Manji, the famous mountain man in India, who built a tunnel from one village to the other, simply because he had a purpose in his life of wanting to get his villagers medical aid. Giles Dooley, the photographer, the National Geographic and BBC photographer who lost 3 limbs in a mine in Afghanistan, realized that his purpose was not photography. Photography was a tool. His purpose was storytelling. And he continued on that purpose. So even though one path was over, he picked up another path. And his path was storytelling. In fact, he realized that he didn't have to use the camera. He could use his body for storytelling, his purpose. All of us have a purpose. And there are very simple questions we can use for asking what this purpose is all about. What makes me happy? What do I like to do? And how will people be better off because of me? And that brings us to our 5th and final antibody, which is called people. The longest running study in Harvard University since 1937 was one question, based on one question: what does it take to thrive? In fact, the question, what does it take to thrive? Simple question. And the researchers thought it's going to be IQ and money and qualifications and social standing. But no, the number one factor that it takes to thrive was actually strong relationships. It's difficult to maintain strong relationships in the current scenario, of course, because there's pressure on the way we can interact. But some of us have family, some of us do not have family around us. It's difficult, but interestingly, there are ways. Now, the study showed that those who were able to have strong relationships actually succeeded more in their professional realm than anybody else, and were earning up to $80,000 per annum more because of strong relationships. Think about it. People leave because of relationships. Spouses argue. It's about relationships, right? So people are the strongest important element in ensuring that you can contribute to happiness. Now, here's what. There are 3 practical tools, again, minimalistic. 3 tools for us to focus on people as an antibody, our strong relationships. How can we build strong relationships in this current downtime, in this lockdown? How can we build relationships and focus on people for our emotional well-being? 3 simple tools again. Minimalism. Number 1, appreciation. Appreciate people, because when you appreciate people, you're actually showing gratitude for having them in your life. You know, we're very quick to notice what goes wrong. And on a lighter note, I think women are even faster than men at finding out what goes wrong with, outside. But we're not that quick to appreciate what is right. We're quicker to appreciate what is going wrong. So in fact, appreciate. You may not be able to give a pat on the back, but a simple handwritten note that you give someone, telling someone that you're happy to have them across. We had that huge event a couple of weeks ago when the Prime Minister requested us to applaud the staff and the warriors, the COVID-19 warriors who are fighting for us. And you saw the impact. It united the country together like one. So in fact, gratitude and appreciation is a number 1 element in the way you can build strong relationships. Think about it. You probably still have a strong relationship with your boss who you really need to admire, or your team members who you really, really adored in the past. Again, quick to find the negatives because it's a negativity bias, right? The second thing is giving. Gratitude, giving, serving. Keep serving, because that's the best way of increasing and focusing and boosting your well-being. In fact, there's data that says the more you're able to give, the more you're going to release a hormone called oxytocin in your body. And oxytocin is a feel-good hormone. It's a hormone that is built between the baby and the mother. So when you're actually giving, you're actually getting into a servitude mode. And when you get into a servitude mode, you actually realize that you're creating a bond of trust. So giving is the second biggest way. Absolutely serving people. And the third tool, the third tip to increase your strength of your relationships is forgiving. There are tough times around us, and people will say harsh things. They will say rude things. Of course, don't ignore abuse. But apart from that, forgive. I mean, holding on to resentment is like taking poison and expecting it to kill the other person. Let go. At this point in time, it's all right, because assume the better of people and allow it to let go. In fact, forgiving, as Nelson Mandela said, and to all my friends from South Africa and my African connections, forgiving begins here and right now. In fact, forgiving actually liberates the soul. So forgive. And with that, I'm going to quickly wind down to our 5 antibodies and what we need to do for our emotional well-being in a minimalistic world when we get back. A, physiology. Get physical and breathe. Physiology. Second, presence. Take a minute and pause between running around between your meetings. And presencing can come when you spend that minute appreciating what's around you. 3, positivity. What's good about this? And what can I do about it? 2 questions to ask yourself. Positivity. Find positive in this and see the way it changes your attitude and perspective. Number 4, of course, purpose. And it cannot be undermined in any format. In fact, the name of my company is Theory of Purpose, because it began my purpose. In fact, purpose. and the 50 people. So there we are, 5 antibodies, the vaccination we need for the stress over virus that we're all facing today, and our emotional well-being, the minimalistic perspective. The 6th one, of course, I'm going to leave with you right now is practice. The more you can practice this daily, the more you will realize that you're really, really healthier. You have emotional well-being for yourself and for others. And on that note, back to you, Aruna. It's been a pleasure having you here. And I'm delighted and honored to be part of this lovely evening with you all today. It's been an exciting time to have so many participants from across the world and the globe. I'm delighted. Thank you so much. And over to you, Aruna.
Thank you, Dr. Shibani. I want to hear Dr. Sandesh and Shilpa, who are there on the panel along with you. So let's hear from them.
Well, hi. Good afternoon, good evening, and good morning, everyone, wherever you all are located. This has been a very interesting talk, and it touched upon various aspects. And for me, from the medical perspective, it was enjoyable to hear the antibody perspective. We are all talking about antibodies and testing for COVID, and this is a very different kind of antibody, which is like the magic bullet for all that is worrying us in this COVID scenario. I got some key takeaways that emotional well-being builds resilience, and we all need to build strong relationships to thrive. We cannot control nor influence the macro environment, but we can certainly control our reactions and actions. I would like to ask a question here. Specifically pinpointed at emotional well-being and as individuals. How does one deal with the stock market crash or pay cuts, job uncertainty, and shutdown of industries? Yeah, Dr. Shibani. I think it's your audio is often.
Yes, so I was getting an echo, which is why I just switched it off. And
Sure,
thank you, Sandesh. In fact, I was whilst you were talking, I was also glancing at the comments that are coming in, and I'm really overwhelmed with some of the very, very nice comments coming up. It feels good. Thank you so much. Somebody was saying something really nice, but go on, Dr. Sandesh. Yes.
Yeah, I wanted to ask a specific question. The antibodies are fantastic. The nuggets of wisdom. But on an individual perspective, how does one deal with stock market crashes, pay cuts, job uncertainties, and shutdown of industries? We need to build emotional resilience, but I would want to have an answer from you.
All right, interesting. So I'm going to go back to what I started the session with. We're in a race constantly for having and doing. And interestingly, whether it is Maslow's hierarchy or whether it's the current situation we're in, we've actually come back to seeing that we need to look at this pause from a positive perspective. So if we realize that the having and the doing is only going to increase the having and the doing for it, but not allow us to be, which is a critical element for our survival and the well-being of our loved ones. Eventually, look at examples of people when they're on their last journey. What matters to them is the time that they spend with their family or the experiences they had in life. So minimalism also talks about focusing on the experience and not on the thing or the materialistic perspective. So my advice or my little bit of thoughts on this is the stock market's ups and downs, let them have the ups and downs. We can continue to remain in an up, because if you do that, then you know for a fact that when the cycle changes, and it will change, you're probably far better off dealing with it again. And eventually we come back to the human being part of it. We don't need to have and do to be a being. You can actually be without the having and the doing. And that's the beauty of emotional wellness. It's self-sufficient. I want to sign off with this one comment that happiness is a one-man job. And that man is you.
That's wonderfully summarized. I would say from a human being to being human.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I can see a few questions that have that have come up, but I'm going to defer to you if there's something you'd like to add to this.
Yeah, we would like to see some questions. I'm not able to see any questions at the moment.
Okay, I think they scrolled upwards, and I caught one of them, in fact. So one of the questions that I caught a little earlier, and I'm going to share this with you, is emotional intelligence. So the question was, is emotional intelligence also emotional well-being? Well, yes, emotional intelligence is one tool for emotional well-being. So there are different components. Emotional intelligence is the ability to ensure that the amygdala hijack doesn't happen. So it is definitely a sub-tool to utilize emotional well-being, but emotional well-being is more than just emotional intelligence. So you have a superset and you have a subset. So hopefully that should answer that
There's
question.
the one more question which says, what is your opinion on expectations?
So would you like to answer that, Dr. Sandesh?
Oh no, well, you go ahead. You've got many antibodies
we have
with you.
Shilpa. Do we have Shilpa with us as well? Maybe she'd like to. She's very learned. And Shilpa, would you like to take that? I'm happy to go, but I'd love
see, in my opinion, first of all, thank you very much, Dr. Shibani. It was really a wonderful session and some grateful insights, tips, and techniques to how to keep your calm and how to be positive. Good techniques in breathing. It really does help. On expectations, what I feel is we have to make them realistic, and agree. Understand yourself. That is the first element that one needs to know before taking on something. That is, if anyone else has an expectation of you, you must need to know yourself and what the other is expecting of you, because you want to deliver 100%. Take on that only if you are quite certain that you are able to, in any circumstance, fulfill it. So
I agree. Yeah, that's so true. Maybe what I could, one little piece that I think I could add on this is expectations are nothing except you trying to administer your own ideologies on others. Now, the more you have expectations of yourself, the more you can use that as a useful stress. So use that to trigger the right actions for yourself, but don't allow the expectations to go down the realm of overstressing or overthinking. Because remember, we discussed that. Overthinking leads to anxiety, leads to depression, and that can come from a stimulus of expectations. If you have expectations, use that to remain on the left-hand side of the curve of stress. It needs to turn you on. Of course, it's great to expect of yourself, but the minute you project those expectations onto others, you're being unfair. Go back to your gratitude.
No, that's nice. That's nice. Well said. There's one more question. It says, is it good to be a high EQ person?
Emotional quotient and emotional intelligence is the #1 determinant of great leadership. In fact, it is one tool that leaders need to incorporate immediately. The most successful leaders are not the ones with the greatest IQ. They're the ones with the greatest EQ. And there's so many experiments that have been done across the globe to create the business case for EQ as well. So the answer to that is absolutely yes.
Well, that's wonderful.
So,
I mean, we can see this in the form of many of our notable leaders who are now running many countries across the world where they are showing EQ while dealing with the post-COVID scenario.
Over to you, Aruna.
Okay, thank you, Shibani. Thank you, Sandesh. Thank you, Shilpa. Just a minute. I'll take a just open up the screen. Okay. Some technical glitch. I'm not able to share my screen properly. I hope you're able to see the screen. These are our speakers for today evening. Thank you all. Now that we have come to the end of this lively gathering, prior to winding up, a few words of announcements and warm to all of you from Mr. Gautam Boda, who's our Group Vice Chairman for J B Boda Group. Let me get him online.
Hi, Aruna. Good evening.
Yes, sir.
Am I audible?
Very much,
Yes,
sir.
very much.
Okay, wonderful. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us this evening on behalf of J B Boda Group and speaker of the day for all the valuable information she has shared with us this evening on emotional well-being. I would also like to extend thanks to our panelists, Mr. Sandesh and Ms. Shilpa, for their willingness and involvement in today's event. I'm totally humbled to see such great response, and we would indeed facilitate such interactive sessions in the future. Please do join us again on 4th May 2020 to listen to our speakers giving insight on employment sector coping with COVID-19. This will be a very important topic for all the HR fraternities. I once again want to state that we are grateful to all the speakers and would like to thank one and all for joining us this evening, and it has been a great pleasure. Thank you very much and stay safe.